It started like any other morning. My wife kissed me goodbye, coffee in hand, as she left for work. But a few hours later, something felt off. She called me, whispering that she thought someone was following her. A white SUV had been behind her for several blocks, then disappeared. Maybe just coincidence. Maybe not. Still, that uneasy feeling lingered. I told her to stay calm, head to her office, and I'd look into it. After all, I do run a cybersecurity firm, and the car she was driving? One of our latest prototypes, fully equipped with next-gen tracking and anti-surveillance tech. Let's just say, if anything unusual happened, I'd know. Later that evening, I started digging into the car's data logs. That's when things got strange. There were pings, little digital breadcrumbs, that didn't come from our system. I spotted a signal bouncing off a third-party GPS tracker, one that had no business being there. Whoever planted it had no clue they were messing with someone who builds this kind of tech for a living. I traced the frequency and pinpointed the device, and the more I uncovered, the more twisted it got. Turns out, the signal led me straight to our neighborhood. More specifically, to someone on the HOA board. And if you live in an HOA, you probably already know where this is going. One particular neighbor, let's just call her Karen, had a reputation. She watched everyone like a hawk, constantly patrolled the block, reported every minor violation, and somehow believed she ran the entire community. But tracking my wife? That was a whole new level. The real kicker? She didn't just plant the tracker out of nosiness. No, there was something deeper going on, something personal. And as I peeled back the layers, I found out just how far she was willing to go, and what she was trying to hide. So now I knew Karen was involved. But what I didn't know yet was why. I couldn't just confront her without proof, so I dug deeper. I reviewed a full week's worth of location data from the tracker she installed. That's when things got even weirder. The tracker had been active for over 10 days. And not just tracking my wife's commute. It had recorded stops in random places. Nowhere my wife had ever been. One location in particular stood out. An empty lot on the edge of town, way off her usual route. I asked my wife if she had ever gone there, and she looked at me like I was crazy. That's when it clicked. Karen was planting a story. Using the tracker to make it look like my wife was going places she wasn't. But for what reason? Was she trying to ruin her reputation? Get her in trouble with the HOA? Or was there something even more personal? I started looking into Karen's recent behavior. She had reported us to the HOA 3 times in the past month. Once for having our trash bins out too early, once for a noise violation that never happened, and the last one was for suspicious activity late at night, on the exact night the GPS tracker went live. That couldn't be a coincidence. Though, thing about people like Karen is, they love control. And if they can't control you, they try to manipulate the story. What she didn't count on, though, was that our car's internal systems had encrypted logs and backups. Nothing could be deleted, not even remotely. I had the tracker's signal, timestamps, and even partial footage from the dash cam. But I still hadn't figured out what she was really after. And the more I looked into her background, the more secrets I started to uncover. Some that didn't just involve her, but a few other neighbors too. At this point, I was juggling 2 things, trying to figure out what Karen's endgame was, and quietly gathering every shred of evidence without tipping her off. I didn't want to start a war with the HOA unless I knew exactly what I was walking into. But as I kept digging, a strange pattern started to appear. Karen wasn't acting alone. The tracker wasn't even purchased under her name. It was registered to someone else on the HOA board, Mike, the so-called treasurer who barely said a word at meetings. I'd always thought he was just along for the ride, but apparently, he was the one paying for surveillance gear. That raised a whole new set of questions. Why would multiple HOA members be involved in spying on my wife? What were they trying to find or frame her for? I started to think this wasn't about my wife at all. Maybe I was the real target. And if that was true, then this was bigger than just some petty HOA drama. My cybersecurity firm has worked on some sensitive contracts. It's not impossible that someone figured out who I was and decided to get close using the HOA as cover. One night, I drove out to that random empty lot where the tracker had logged activity. I parked down the street and watched. After about 20 minutes, a black sedan pulled in, lights off, and just sat there. I didn't recognize the car, but I grabbed a few photos just in case. This wasn't just about a Karen being nosy anymore. This was starting to look like a setup. And here's the twist that really shook me. I pulled property records on Karen's house and found it wasn't in her name. It was in a trust linked to a shell company. And that company? It had connections to a data firm that's been flagged for shady surveillance contracts. That's when I realized this whole thing might have been planned long before the tracker even went on the car. After discovering the shell company behind Karen's house, I knew I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. This wasn't just HOA, drama spiraling out of control. This was something calculated. Every step they took had been covered just enough to avoid suspicion from anyone who wasn't looking closely. But unfortunately for them, I was looking very closely now. I started cross-referencing every HOA member's digital footprint. Most of it was the usual neighborhood gossip, but a few odd things popped up. Emails that had no reason to be encrypted, calendar entries labeled only as meetings, and secure message pings between Mike and someone using an anonymous VPN. That person's IP had been bouncing through several countries, but the final node always came back to our town. Too close to be random. Around this time, my wife started noticing people watching her, not just the white SUV again, but different cars, parked in places they didn't belong. Same faces. She even caught one of them trying to look into her office window during lunch. That's when it became clear. Whatever they were after, they weren't done yet. I upgraded our home surveillance, added decoys to our network, and set traps inside the car's system to alert me if someone tried accessing it again. 2 nights later, I got a hit. Someone tried to tap into the car's onboard diagnostics, remotely. They didn't expect a back door I'd left behind. I tracked the signal back to a local office building that, from the outside, looked completely empty. But inside? Leased by the same shell company tied to Karen's house. The pieces were finally locking into place, but I still didn't have the full picture. And the closer I got, the more dangerous things started to feel. I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor anymore. This was organized, purposeful, and whatever they were trying to cover up, they were willing to go a lot further than I thought, to keep it buried. Just when I thought I was closing in, something happened that threw everything sideways. I was reviewing the footage from our home security system, something I'd done 100 times by now. But this time, I spotted something I hadn't noticed before. A delivery driver, or at least someone pretending to be one, had walked up to our front door 2 days earlier. He didn't leave a package. He stood there for about 5 seconds, glanced around, and then reached into his pocket. Whatever he placed near the doorframe wasn't obvious at first, but when I zoomed in, I caught it. A tiny black square tucked just beneath the trim. It was a bug. They weren't just tracking my wife anymore. They were listening. To us. In our own home. That's when the second twist hit, and it hit hard. I was about to confront Karen and Mike directly, now feeling confident I had enough to at least scare them off. But before I could, I got an email from a burner account. No name, no subject. Just a single sentence. You're not the only one watching. Attached was a screenshot of me sitting at my desk, staring at my monitor. It was taken from inside my office, not a webcam feed, an angle I couldn't explain. Someone had access to the interior of our home network, my network. the one I built from the ground up. That chilled me more than anything else. It meant one thing. This wasn't just HOA members poking around. Someone with serious resources was behind them. And they weren't just interested in us. They were targeting our data, our movements, our conversations. This was surveillance on a whole new level. And then, just as I was processing all of this, my wife called. Her voice was shaky. She said her car dashboard just lit up with an alert she'd never seen before. Something about unauthorized remote control attempt blocked. She was parked, alone, in a garage downtown. I told her to stay put. But I knew. We were out of time. I jumped in the car and headed straight to the parking garage downtown. My wife was still inside her car, eyes wide, holding the steering wheel like it was her lifeline. I scanned the area before getting out. No obvious threats. But at this point, I knew better than to trust what was visible. I told her to keep the engine off, handed her a spare phone we keep for emergencies, and ran a quick scan using one of my firm's portable diagnostic kits. And there it was. Another remote access attempt, blocked by our system just seconds before it could take control of the vehicle's core functions. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to watch anymore. They were trying to manipulate the car. I traced the intrusion in real time, ping after ping. It was coming from that same empty office building. I called a contact of mine at the local cybercrimes division and gave them everything. IP logs, audio captures from the bug on our door, photos of the fake delivery guy, even the shell company's data trail. Within an hour, agents were on site. What they found blew the whole thing open. Inside that building was a full surveillance setup, multiple screens tracking our movements, intercepted audio files, and hard drives loaded with data not just on us, but on several other residents in our community. Turns out, the shell company wasn't just tied to Karen, it was Karen. She was the face used to blend into the neighborhood. But the real operation? It was a private intelligence firm operating under the radar, harvesting data from suburban areas to build behavioral profiles. Mike and a few other HOA board members were on their payroll. But here's the twist. They weren't after me at first. They were after one of my wife's clients. She's a consultant in biotech, and apparently, someone thought her client's upcoming merger was worth digging into by any means necessary. We were just the collateral. But because they underestimated who we were, we caught them before they crossed the line they couldn't come back from. The authorities took over. Arrests were made, and the firm was exposed. But to this day, I still wonder, if I hadn't built that car myself, if my wife hadn't sensed something was off that morning, would we have ever known? After everything unfolded, life slowly began returning to normal, or at least something close to it. The investigation revealed just how far the surveillance had gone. Karen had been coached from day one, carefully placed, in the community to blend in, build trust, and quietly gather intel. The rest of the HOA board claimed ignorance, and honestly, I believe most of them were just pawns. Only Mike seemed to truly understand what he was part of, and now he's facing federal charges along with several others tied to the private firm. We upgraded our home security one last time and did a full sweep of every device, every wire, every system we owned. I made sure our car's prototype software had 0 blind spots. My wife changed her work protocols, and her client cut ties with the merger that started this whole mess. Their trust in her only grew stronger after they realized how close they'd come to being exploited. Looking back, it still feels surreal. That a nosy HOA Karen turned out to be a key player in a high-level data surveillance ring. It sounds like something out of a movie. But it was real. And the biggest lesson we learned? You never really know who's watching, or why. I used to think I was careful with security, but this reminded me that even the people right outside your front door can be part of something much bigger. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation that saved us. So yeah, Next time someone parks too close, installs a camera facing your yard, or suddenly joins the HOA with a little too much enthusiasm, trust your gut. Because if this whole experience taught me anything, it's this. Privacy isn't something you're given. It's something you have to protect every single day.